So you have recorded the very first episode of your podcast and now you're looking to share it with people. In this video, we're going to be showing you how you can upload your podcast to some of the biggest podcast streamers out there, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. So let's get straight into it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is head over to a podcast hosting platform called podcast.co. Now, this is actually of our sister companies here at Audio Insider, but it genuinely is one of the best platforms you can use to share your podcast with other services like Spotify. Now, when you get to the homepage, you'll see some of the features you'll find with podcast.co, and one of the great things about it is it actually offers a 14-day free trial. So you can set up your podcast on there, upload it to some of the services you want your podcast to appear on, and get an idea of whether or not you think it's a service for you before having to pay a penny. And if you're worried that we're being biased here, don't worry. Big brands like Vice, UNICEF, Samsung, they're all using podcast.co as well. So what you want to do is you want to head over to Try for Free in the corner, and you're going to want to click on one of the plans. Now, like I say, you can go straight in on that 14-day free trial, but obviously once that ends, you will have to pay one of the fees and you will have to go on one of the plans. Now, one of the big benefits of podcast.co is that with any of the plans, you're going to get a podcast page where your podcast can live. And this is a great way for people to find your podcast and then find it on the service that they prefer. Obviously, some people listen on Spotify, some listen on Apple Podcasts. So what you want to do is have one hub page where people can go to and find the link to any of these different services. So I put in all my details and I am now ready to move on to the second step, which is uploading your first episode. So once you've signed up, you're going to see this screen here that says let's get started, and you're going to come across 3 different options. Now, the first is import an existing show. Now, this is important if maybe you already have a podcast and you're looking to move providers from the service you're currently using to upload your podcast. So if you already have that, then you'll already have an RSS feed. And if you'd like to transfer that RSS feed so you don't lose access to the episodes that you've already uploaded, then you can copy and paste that onto podcast.co, and that should all move over seamlessly. However, if you haven't done that already and you want to start from scratch, then you can go ahead and just create a public show in the middle here. Or likewise, if you want to make a podcast that only a select few people can listen to, maybe people within your business or people who have paid a fee to listen to it, then you can go ahead and create a private show here. But for today, I'm going to be showing you how to do it with a public show. So I'm going to click create public show, and then you're going to have to put in some details. So I'm going to put in Audio Insider Podcast, primary category. We'll put down comedy because I'm hilarious. Then we're going to go subcategories. Well, I guess it's comedy, but it's about TV. So I'm going to go TV reviews. And then language, English. I speak English. Description. This is the best podcast in the world. As you can see, I'm just putting this in as an example. You would do a much better job than me. So there we go. We now have a link to our podcast. So we're just going to go ahead and click next. We're happy with that. You can change this link if you want. Maybe I just want to call it Audio Pod. There we go. Oh, there we go. I can do that. Let's see if it's available. It is available. Cool. So we're going to go ahead and go with Audio Pod, and now you can upload your podcast artwork. Now, we have another video about how to make podcast artwork, so I won't go into that here, but obviously that's incredibly important and you want to make sure you get this right. But let's say we already have it uploaded. I'm just going to upload it here, and then we'll click Create Podcast. So now we've done all that, we can upload our first episode. Now, there's loads of different tips about how to do your first episode. Obviously, it's quite an important one for getting people to continue to listen or subscribe. And you're also going to want to make sure you have a trailer to go alongside an episode. And oh my god, wow, all of a sudden I've got 10 episodes right here. I'm joking, of course. We already actually have an Audio Insider podcast, but for the sake of just like seeing a fully fledged podcast in action, this is what it looks like when you've started uploading a few episodes. Now, when you upload a podcast, you're obviously going to get the basic options such as the name of the episode in question, description, and any links you want to include. You can change the author each time. You don't need to have the author the same. So say 1 week the author might be Rowan Walsh, but if we decide later on, actually we'll put it just under the Audio Insider umbrella, you can change that. Another cool thing is you can specify what kind of episode it might be. So for instance here, this is a full episode of the podcast, but say if you want to do a bonus episode, which is a bit different from your usual show, you can make that clear here. Likewise, if you want to upload a trailer for your show, just like a 1-minute trailer telling everyone about your show, you can do that. And actually, we suggest you do that alongside your first episode, or maybe even upload that before your first episode to give people a taste of what they're going to hear. And then of course you can specify the episode number, and if you work in seasons as well, you can also put season 1, season 2. It's totally up to you really, or you can leave it blank if you don't have seasons and it's just a generic episode 10. You can have a website link of course as well, so if you want people to go to a specific website, you can also let the different platforms know if it's going to be explicit. So if I tick that here, that'll let Spotify, for instance, know that it's an explicit episode and shouldn't be listened to by people with delicate ears, should we say. And you can also adjust the publishing date. For, say, you deleted an episode and then you re-uploaded it, but you wanted it to have the same date as it originally had, you can change that here. Another really cool thing about podcast.co is that, say you upload an episode and you're listening back to it, it's gone out, and then you hear an error or maybe something that you should have edited out but you forgot to, you can actually go ahead and just replace the file, and then that'll re-upload to podcast.co. So basically, if there is an error, you re-upload the file without the error, and that will replace the original file, so there's no more error. Just like magic. A few more things you can do here. You can check out analytics for each episode to give you a sort of more in-depth look at how well the episode's doing. And this breaks things down into like location, so I can see here that this podcast is quite popular in the United States, and Apple Podcasts. 90% of people are listening on Apple Podcasts, interestingly. I can also go back at any time and change the settings for every episode. So you know how I just went through and created the podcast, and I created the name and the category and all that sort of stuff. I can go ahead and edit that at any time. So you've uploaded your first podcast. Now it's time to get your podcast on all the different directories. So you want to head over to share and publish, and this is where you'll see your podcast RSS feed. Now, this is what I mentioned earlier. This is the link you need if ever you move providers. Underneath here, you've got directory links. Now, this is really important. If you want your podcast to appear on any directory, such as Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you need to make sure that these boxes are ticked and full with a link. This is essentially attaching a link, so an Apple Podcast link, for example here, to podcast.co, making sure it knows that the podcast listed here is the podcast listed on podcast.co. It kind of links the two directories together. So when you've uploaded your first podcast and you come to this page, podcast.co will give you the option to attach your podcast to these different directories automatically. So that's what I've done here. The only one you can't do that with is Apple Podcasts, which you need to go in and do yourself by creating an Apple Podcast Connect account. If you're not that bothered about your podcast being on Apple Podcasts, maybe you just want it on Spotify, for instance, you don't have to do this. That's absolutely fine. But we'd always recommend that you do, just because obviously appearing on more directories is always going to be good for your podcast, because not everyone uses Spotify, for instance. So like I say, once you've let podcast.co automatically link your podcast to all the directories that you want, they will appear here. All you need to do then after that is click save, and voila, your podcast will now be available on those directories once you click publish on your episode. If you haven't clicked publish yet, if it's still unlisted or scheduled, they won't appear yet. And just a word of warning, it might not appear straight away. Sometimes it can take a couple of minutes depending on the directory. Finally, let's take a look at the podcast page. So this is the thing that I talked about at the start, where podcast.co creates a page for you, allowing your listeners to find whatever directory they want. So to give you an example of what one looks like, if I click on here, this is what the Audio Insider podcast.co page looks like. So you've got all the podcast episodes listed here. So technically, people can just listen to the podcast through this page itself. That's absolutely fine. Or if they'd prefer to listen to it on their directory of choice, they can just click subscribe, and all the options come up here as to where they can listen to it. And then all they need to do is click on the link and they'll be taken there. So this is really cool. You can customize this how you like. For instance, here we've got a bit about the podcast. We've got the host listed at the bottom, and then little bits as well, like social media and our website. It's a really simple little page, but it gets the job done really nicely. And like I say, it's just a great way to send people to a page with everything they're possibly going to need to know. And yeah, you get loads of different options here to design your page. You can change colors, fonts. You can have an image in the background, or you can just have like a sort of wave effect. It's totally up to you. Change it how you like. And I'd put a lot of effort into this actually, because like I say, this is a hub for your whole podcast. This might be the first thing people see when they see you sharing your podcast. So make sure it's attractive looking. It says exactly what they need to know. And yeah, just make sure you're listed on as many directories as possible, because obviously yeah, then more people will listen to your podcast. And that is pretty much it. That is a very quick overview of the podcast.co platform. But there we go. In 4 easy steps, your podcast is now available on all the big hitters. And hopefully that means lots of people are now listening. If you'd like to know more about starting a podcast, then we have heaps of information available in the playlist below in the description. And if you have any other questions about setting up a podcast on podcast.co, don't be scared to let us know in the comments. We will get back to you as soon as possible. But until next time, thank you very much for watching this very quick video, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.